It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
We are going to the playoffs. Playoff edition of Rico Brogna. How are we all feeling? Are we feeling all right? What a freaking Monday. What a day. I'm not sure how everyone consumed game one of this doubleheader between the Mets and the Braves, but it was stressful. I feel like I aged about 5 or 6 years, and what we ended up having was, quite frankly, and I don't like to be reactionary to this, sometimes you got to let it breathe, and then you'll have a better opinion, but I think I can say this a mere 6 or 7 hours after this game ended, game one of the doubleheader. We all witnessed the greatest regular season game in the history of the New York Mets, and I defy anybody to come up with a regular season game that had the mix of impact, meaning, craziness, back and forth emotions to the exhilarating ending. It really had everything. You know, I'm going to try to talk a lot about this game and everything that we experienced. We're also going to try to preview game one of the wild card series now that it's upon us, and we don't exactly have a lot of time because game one is on Tuesday at 5:32 p.m. We're going to try to do all of that. We're going to try to capture all the emotions of what was just an absolutely insane, surreal baseball day you're never going to forget. The Mets dramatically win game one of the doubleheader against the Atlanta Braves. They then lose game two. Who cares? Though we will spend some time on that. And now it's off to Milwaukee. The New York Mets are in the postseason for the second time in 3 years, for the 7th time in my lifetime, for the 11th time in the history of the franchise. Is that really the number? 11 times? 69, 73, 86, 88, 99, 2000, 06, 15, 16, and 22. So yeah, 11 times in the history of this franchise. That's why we get so excited. A lot of people may not understand that. Yankee fans may not understand that. It's just the playoffs. For them, it's a birthright. And a lot of that is they have seen the Yankees in the playoffs a lot. You know, there are some fan bases that see their teams in the playoffs every single year. That's not us. I hope that changes. I hope that we aren't freaking out over a playoff appearance every single year. I hope it becomes the norm. But for now, making the playoffs, it's like sex. It doesn't happen very often. Well, I guess it depends if you're married or not, or where you are in life, right? Anyhow, Hoff, we shared a little bit of this together because we had a watch party on WFAN today, and I did my best to try to do a radio show while watching this game. I ask you, when Edwin Diaz blew this game in the bottom of the 8th inning and Ozzie Albies parked that double off the left field wall, A, what was going through your mind? And B, how much did you want to never see Edwin Diaz again?
I was furious. It was weird because I had first guessed that decision to go to Diaz so early. You know, I just saw the mistake that Snedeker made with going to Iglesias in a situation where I'm like, if this game goes to extra innings, or this game, you know, if somehow the Braves end up losing this game and need to get the Iglesias, is he going to be compromised for the next game? And then I see them go to Edwin Diaz, and you just see that he doesn't have it. And I'm freaking out going, we just did the same thing.
Right. We repeated exactly what they did, which is amazing.
Yeah. How dumb are we? So I was freaked out, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it I was watching. But then I could because it's the Braves.
Yeah, so and I described this because we were on the air. So for anyone who saw it, you may have seen my live reactions to this, but for many who didn't, because you know they're working or they're watching the game and they're not dealing with a audio watch party. I disagree with you, Pete. I do. I wanted to go to Edwin Diaz because once the Mets miraculously exploded in the 8th inning, and that really did feel like it came out of nowhere. This game felt like a long death march. They couldn't hit it all. They had the golden opportunity early when Tyrone Taylor hit that weird play. I don't think I've ever seen it before, where he literally broke the baseball and it was in foul territory and then started curving into fair territory. And good job by him, because he ran it out and it turned into an infield hit. And then he stole second base, and they had a runner on second and nobody out, and a runner on third and less than 2 outs. To me, that moment in the third inning almost felt like, all right, we're not winning this game. You have to take advantage of that opportunity. And that was the inning, the following inning, when Tyler McGill made the one mistake, which was the 2-run home run to Ozzie Albies. That was it. Because outside of that, Tyler McGill, for the most part, pitched well. He ended up giving up a home run to Ramon Laureano in the 6th inning when Mendy was trying to push him. But when the Mets put together that incredible rally in the 8th inning that really came out of nowhere, and they're up 6-3, I'm going for the kill. And to me, Edwin Diaz, in that spot with a runner on first and second at the time and 1 out, that's the moment you do it. Because you still have a 3-run lead. See, what Snitker did that was very, very risky, and look, ultimately, I guess it didn't backfire because Iglesias pitched the second game of the doubleheader and the Braves won. They were in the playoffs. But what he did that was so risky is when Snitker went to Iglesias, the Mets already had 2 guys on base with nobody out down a run. So you put him in a spot in which the percentages of giving up the lead and having the Mets tie it or take the lead are actually pretty high. No, it may not feel that way for us because we're so used to the Mets leaving a country on base, but he went to Iglesias with first and second and nobody out in the 8th inning with 2, 3, 4 coming up to face Jose Iglesias of all people. So when he made that move, my thought was, wow, that's very risky, because you're going to your A reliever, your top reliever, in a spot where getting a 6-out save, it's asking a lot because you're bringing him in with 2 on and nobody out. I thought when he went to Diaz, it was a little bit different. First of all, there was 1 out. So you're not asking for 6 outs. You're asking for 5 outs, a little bit difference. And you're also bringing him in with a little bit of a margin for error. Because think about it. The tying run's at the plate. So yeah, sure, he could give up a home run and give the game up, but he'd have to give up a home run. He'd have to give up multiple hits to give up the lead. So I didn't disagree with Mendy at all going to Edwin Diaz. I thought it was the right move. He was going for the kill. That's what he was doing. And what just was stunning was how after he got Gio Urshela to ground out, he gives up the rip to Jared Kelenic. And that whole sequence was just scary as all hell. When the Braves are sending up Jared Kelenic to take on Edwin Diaz, and we all know the history, we don't have to waste our time talking about it, we're all envisioning the worst possible thing. Thinking to ourselves, are you kidding me? Is Jared Kelenic really going to come up and do something crazy here? Is that what's going to happen? Is Jared Kelenic going to hit a game-tying 3-run home run? Is he going to rip one up the alley and at least make it a 1-run game? And when he ripped that ball down the first base line, and Pete, and give Pete credit for this. I know his bat has not been there, and look, our focus will certainly be on him hitting in this series against the Brewers. But when Pete makes that diving play, the sick feeling we all had, not seeing anyone cover first base. And look, Edwin Diaz knew it because you saw Edwin like pounding his chest 150 times. He knew he should have gotten over there. But that was another killer moment. And clearly it derailed Edwin Diaz. Now, I don't know if Diaz does run immediately, if they throw Kelenic out at first base. I think they do, but there's no way to actually know. It was going to be a bang-bang play. Pete has also struggled sometimes on making that throw to first base. But nevertheless, if you're Edwin Diaz, you never even gave yourself a chance. You never even put yourself in a spot where you can get that 3rd out. And for all of everybody who's turned on Pete, because Pete has not gotten a big hit, which he still hasn't, if we're being honest about him, that was going to be, if Edwin Diaz covers first base, the defensive play. Like, if that play is made, and then hypothetically, Edwin Diaz pitches a clean 9th inning, that's one of the main things we're talking about today. Wow, Pete Alonso's glove of all things saved the New York Mets. But here's the problem, and this is where Edwin's got to figure this out moving forward. It sucks, man, that you had a mental block. It sucks that you didn't run over to first base and cover. But you cannot implode the way you did right after that. He walked Michael Harris on 4 pitches. 4 pitches. He's walking Michael Harris. How does that happen? How do you let that happen? And then after that, he falls behind Ozzie Albies. You could all kind of just feel, he had that sick feeling on what was going to happen next. And Albies just missed a grand slam. I mean, barely missed a grand slam. Luckily, it went off the foot of the wall. And to Edwin Diaz's credit, after that deflating moment, it was deflating when Albies got that hit. He got the last out of the inning. And that's an underrated thing, but it's an important thing because Marcelo Zuna was the batter. And Marcelo Zuna could have parked one. He could have ripped an RBI double, and the Met deficit could have been greater. Certainly at the time, we're thinking they're dead. I think everybody's thinking they're dead. I mean, can you believe that Edwin Diaz blew this game? And the one thing, and I said this on the Rico last night, I can't, because a lot of people tried to tell me this, I couldn't just sit there and say, well, don't worry. Second game of the doubleheader, the Braves aren't going to care. I couldn't just live that way because it's baseball. Baseball's a weird freaking sport. And even if they did win, you're going to have to sweat through a game that you shouldn't have to sweat through because you should have won game one when you gave your closer a 3-run lead with an out in the 8th inning. So I was not in my head thinking, hey, don't worry, there's a second game of the doubleheader. I wasn't thinking that at all. I was thinking, you got to freaking win this game. I can't believe the Mets teased us like this. They score 6 runs in the 8th inning. They take a 6-3 lead, and now we give it all back in the bottom of the 8th inning. You got to be kidding me. But what was very, very important, and I understand why Snitker did it, but it gave us a chance, was the fact that when Raisel Iglesias blew the save for Atlanta, and he gave up the game-tying hit to Iglesias, and he gave up the sacrifice fly to Vientos, and then when he gave up the bomb to Brandon Nimmo, Snitker took him out. And I get why. Because he's playing the long game. It's the same thing to a degree that Mendy was doing when he went to low-leverage relievers, when he asked Tyler McGill to throw 100 pitches, when he went to Huascar Brazoban, when he went to Adam Ottavino. Mendy was playing the long game. He was thinking to himself, hey, we're down 3-0. I don't know if this team's ever going to score. Let me not use my top relieving arms. So Snitker's thinking to himself, you know what? Now I'm down 6-3. I've already used Iglesias. If I keep him in this game and he throws more pitches, there's no way I'm going to use him in the second game of the doubleheader. So let me get him out in case I need to use him later. He did use him later, spoiler alert. He did a fine job in game 2, as if any of us give a rat's ass. But by taking Iglesias out, when the Mets got to the 9th inning, now down a run, it was Pierce Johnson, not Raisel Iglesias. And that gave us hope. And you look at that 9th inning, and you look at Alvarez popping up meekly, and then very underrated, but ain't going to be underrated here at the Rico, Starling Marte off of the bench after pinch hitting for Harrison Bader in the midst of that rally in the 8th inning, is behind in the count when he rips a base hit to center field. And maybe it felt innocuous at the time, but that is a tremendous at-bat. That's an underrated at-bat. And for all the guys that are going to get their bouquets for that incredible Game 1 victory, and a lot of guys deserve it, Starling Marte very underratedly coming off the bench, getting multiple base hits. Thank you, Starling Marte. And then you get to Lindor. Francisco Lindor, let's make this very clear, because we do Ricos all the time throughout baseball seasons, and we react to everything, okay? We don't just mention it once in a while. We are here together talking about every series the Mets play. And when you do that over the course of 162 games, you get very heated about the recency. You get very upset about what's going on in the moment. So I want you to bottle this. I want you to channel this. Me too, by the way. I'm not lecturing. I'm a part of this too. I'm a crazed lunatic as well. Let us bottle Francisco Lindor from September 30th, 2024, because Francisco Lindor has earned our benefit of the doubt. Francisco Lindor has earned not hearing boos at Citi Field when he's slumping in April or May. Francisco Lindor had his epic Met moment. A lot of guys don't have that. Some guys do. You would think that all the great ones do. David Wright has a few. Mike Piazza has a few. Edgardo Alfonso has a lot of them. He may have the most. But for Francisco Lindor, who's been a fine New York Met, we all know his story. His first year wasn't great. There was some controversy. Remember the thumbs down? He has a very good 2022, but like everyone else, didn't make that impact against Atlanta, didn't make that impact against San Diego. Last year, 2023, has a fine year, but the Mets suck. And is there issues in the locker room? Is he not a leader? Lindor was fine the last couple of years, but Met fans hadn't fully bought in. This season, from the meeting to his incredible push, to the stats, to the defense, to the clutchness, capped off by a clutch 2-run home run with a capital CLUTCH. It doesn't get more clutch than you just gave up a 6-3 lead in the 8th in game 161 as your backs are slowly starting to get to the wall. And with a bad back, no pun intended, with a bad freaking back, he lifts one to center field. So at this moment, we were at commercial break. It's one of the tough things about doing a live kind of watch. I guess if we do a Rico, we don't have to worry about commercial breaks. But during a radio broadcast, you got to go to commercial. And I tried to go to commercial when the game was at commercial. Problem is the game's at commercial for 2 minutes. We're at commercial for 7.5. So we're at commercial as Lindor hits that. So I heard Gary's call because we popped up the volume on SNY when we're at commercial. And I hear Gary say he got under it. And I trust Gary Cohen. So now he got under it. I'm watching the ball travel to center field. And I'm like, oh, he's got a chance. He's got a chance. This freaking ball may get out. And then you see Michael Harris, who's been a thorn in our side, climb that wall. And as he's climbing that wall, I'm begging to the baseball gods, you can't do this. You've done enough, sir. You cannot have Michael Harris climb the fence and rob us of a home run. Can't do it. You can do a lot of things to us. You can't do that. Can't do that. And luckily, he did not. And Francisco Lindor etched his name in New York Met franchise history. Sure, we want it to be in the World Series. We want to win a championship. But for anyone of my generation, anyone 45 and under who doesn't remember 1986 or doesn't remember 1969, all our heroes haven't won. All our amazing moments come prior to winning a championship because we haven't seen him win a championship. Now, I hope Lindor writes some World Series moments, as do everyone else. But for this, game 161, that was as clutch a regular season home run as humanly possible. But that wasn't it. I mean, I was thrilled, but I was still nervous because then Mendy had the decision to make, the ultimate decision, which again, we lived through live on the air. And I said, I'd stick with Diaz. I said it on the air because for 2 reasons. And I gave these 2 reasons. Number one, what are your other options? You're going to go to Ryan Stanek? That was the guy that Mendy had warming up. Mendy was clearly holding off on Jose Budo, holding off on Reed Garrett, thinking to himself, I may need him in game 2. And if we don't win this game, I'm going to need to win game 2. So your option at that moment is Ryan Stanek, who certainly has pitched in big moments before, or Edwin Diaz. Hoff, I wanted to stick with Edwin Diaz despite how many pitches he threw and despite the meltdown in the 8th inning. He also was able to get that last out, which means something to me. So I was on the side of letting Edwin Diaz start the 9th inning. You were there in the room with me, but I don't remember what you thought. What did you think?
I didn't feel comfortable. I was almost like, all right, go to Stanek. I was fine with it because you said you were happy you got the last out. I was like, okay, we survived. Let's go give somebody a fresh inning and let's not mess around because if this gets out of hand early, we're screwed.
Well, I also thought, depending on how he looked, you could make the call. There's no 3-batter minimum. He already filled those requirements. So if he had come in and, let's say, walked Matt Olson on 4 pitches, because that's when you could tell Edwin's losing it, when he walked Michael Harris on 4 pitches, then, yeah, card subject to change. I mean, then you could take him out. It's funny. I admit this. He got Matt Olson on the first pitch, which was huge. Got Olson a pop-up. when he gave up the base hit to Jorge Soler, or no, Eli White, because Eli White came in for defense. That's right, which is always risky when you make those defensive moves because you lose a little bit offensively. Mets did the same thing with Vientos. It did not come back and kill him. But when Eli White blooped that base hit, I was ready to pull him. At that moment, I was ready, and that's when Mendy went to the mound. Remember, Carlos Mendoza went to the mound with a runner on first and one out, and I even said this, all right, you know what? Edwin, you got me one out in the ninth inning. I appreciate it. Tying runs on base. Screw it. Let's go to Ryan Stanek. Mendy didn't. Mendy obviously went out there to look into his eyes and see how he feels. Because the legend of this game is that Edwin Diaz talked himself back into the game, that they had taken him out. Hefner had told him, you're done after the eighth inning. When Lindor hit the home run, Diaz goes back and says, I need the final 3 outs. So you had a motivated player. Now, that's not always something you should listen to, because one of my biggest things that pisses me off was Matt Harvey talking himself into game 5 and pitching the ninth inning, which I hated. And Terry Collins, as the manager, should have said, nope, we're going to give Jeurys Familia a clean inning. So it isn't always an exact science on listening to the player versus listening to your gut, but I would have pulled him for Laureano and Travis d'Arnaud. Mendy did not. And Mendy is managed that way all season long. And what'd you think when Mendy went out there? Did you think he was pulling him? Did you say again, hey, get him out of the game?
No, I honestly thought that it was at that point in time, I just think they were going to stick with him. So I'm actually happy that Mendy went out there and talked to him, because it's funny. In the 8th inning, he looked emotionally worn out.
Yeah.
He looked like he didn't want to be on the mound. At that point in time, it looked like he wanted to be out there. So I felt it's weird how you flow in a game, because I'm telling you, like, I wanted Stanek to start it, but at that point in time, I'm like, listen, I'll stick with Diaz. I'm fine with it. Well,
it turned out to be the right decision. He threw some nasty sliders to Laureano to strike him out, and then you get Travis d'Arnaud, and that was the at-bat where it was very difficult to watch. Very difficult to watch, especially knowing I'm on the radio with everybody. That's why I think this experience may have told me not to do live Ricos during games, because it was so freaking painful. It was so awful to have to experience. What you need to do, by the way, and this is a bad job by your crew, you needed to be able to watch it more and let them create the soundtrack for everybody, and you just react. That was my fault. You know, as the leader of the show, I could have passed the ball a lot more. I could have been more like Jason Kidd. Instead, I was like Stephon Marbury. I took way too many shots.
I was going to go Allen Iverson or Carmelo Anthony.
No. I picked 2 guys that were on my basketball team.
Oh, got it.
By the way, 2 guys that also eventually played for the Knicks. So
I was about to say that's where I always go to. Starbury was definitely a Knick.
Starbury, I'm not going to argue about. You want him to be a Knick, that's fine. But Jason Kidd's a Net, so don't embarrass yourself with that. But that d'Arnaud at bat was very difficult to watch. I did not have a lot of confidence. I saw a lot of horrible things. You know what I also was thinking about when d'Arnaud came up? I'm thinking to myself, so let's say he gets an RBI hit, right? Ties the game up. And the Mets get through the inning. Are we really going to play with extra inning rules? I know it's a regular season game, so yeah, we're going to put a guy on second base, but it felt like such a playoff game. And so, for example, tomorrow night or tonight, whenever you're listening to this podcast, the Mets are playing a playoff game. If the game goes to the 10th inning, there isn't a runner on second base. That is a dopey regular season rule. So there was a brief moment during the d'Arnaud at bat where I'm thinking about, oh my God, we're going to put a guy on second base in the 10th inning. How stupid is that?
Well, that's what. So one of the sales guys came up to me and was like, "Hey, for the playoffs, do they put a runner on second base?" I go, "We're not in the playoffs, dude. This is not a playoff."
It felt like one, but no, it was not a playoff game. Yeah, but that is a public service. In case anybody forgot, we do not put a runner on second base in the postseason. That is a squarely regular season rule. But Edwin Diaz got d'Arnaud to poke that ball on the ground, very fittingly to Francisco Lindor. And what a moment. What a moment of exhilaration if you're a New York Met fan, that this team, a team that lost our trust, gained our trust, lost our trust, gained our trust, lost our trust, gained our trust. Finally, at the end, when all things seemed so dark based on what happened on this road trip, based on their struggles in Atlanta, based on the fact that they could not hit Spencer Schwellenbach for the first 7 innings of this game. The New York Mets gained our trust back with truly an incredible victory, a victory that I do think lives in history. I think it goes down as one of the all-time great Met wins. It's very tough to take a win like this in any regular season and put it up against Game 6, 86, take your pick, NLCS or World Series. I mean, that just seems impossible. And for us who are younger, you think about some of the other postseason games that are incredible. Game 5 against the LA Dodgers in 2015, the Benny Agbayani game in 2000, the incredible game against the Giants where Armando Benitez blew it and then John Franco held on when JT Snow hit the game-tying home run, the Todd Pratt game. Like, there's a lot of incredible Met games in our lifetime. That's why you go regular season. And you can't argue it. Salicata was on for us for a few minutes, and he was talking about how it reminded him of the Matt Franco game, which, for my money, I'm with Sal, was one of the great regular season games in the history of the New York Mets. No doubt about it. I think most Met fans remember that. Saturday afternoon at Chase Stadium, the back-and-forth nature of it, and then Matt Franco strikes out on an 0-2 pitch, but wait, it's called a ball, next pitch, game-winning base hit against the greatest closer in the history of the sport. But it's July against the Yankees. You know what I mean? Like, sure, it was a great victory, and we remember it all these years later, 25 years later. But when you think about it and you examine it, okay, it was a great regular season game. This was a great regular season game that led to something tangible, the postseason. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the postseason. The Mets could literally lose 2 games and go home. I still think, even if that happens, and I'll be disappointed, don't get me wrong, we'll do Rico's and I'll probably be bitching about something. So I'm not going to act like it's no big deal. Of course it's a big deal. You get to the playoffs, you then want to win. But I do think that even a sweep against Milwaukee would not take away necessarily from the awesomeness of that moment. Like, that is still a Met classic. That is still a game we're talking about years from now. Of course, you hope it leads to something bigger than losing 2 straight games to the Brewers. But really was an incredible moment and an outstanding victory. And it's funny, when they got the win, it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to kind of get my brain on game 2 and think about, okay, does this matter? There's something on the line. Mets win, they go to San Diego. They knock Atlanta out. Mets lose, Atlanta's in. Mets go to Milwaukee. Do we care? And that was the first time I really gave it thought. Like, who do I want to play? Do I want to play the Brewers? Do I want to play the Padres? Am I looking at the bracket, analyzing the Phillies in the divisional round versus the Dodgers in the divisional round? Am I looking at start times? This Brewer game starts at 5:30, which selfishly sucks. I'm on the air till 6:30. Would I prefer to play the Padres just based on that? Not really. Yeah. My own selfish needs are not above what I think gives this team the best chance to win. So as this game started, and they did call up Joey Lucchesi to make the start, got rid of Alex Young. So Alex Young will not be on the playoff roster because I think those rules still apply, that because he was optioned down, you have to wait 10 days before you recall him. So you can kind of eliminate him from the postseason roster, which probably was going to be the case anyway. And we're going to spend some time on the postseason roster in a few minutes. Trust me, we'll get to all that boring stuff or exciting stuff. I think it's exciting. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But as the game started, I had mixed emotions because one side of me wanted to knock out Atlanta and win this game. But the other side of me, not that I prefer the Brewers, because I think when you hear that, you take it as, oh, the Brewers suck. You think the Brewers aren't any good. No. The Brewers are a good team. We just saw the Brewers. We know what they can do. They have a top closer in Devin Williams. They have a very good bullpen. They obviously can run all day on you. The other scary thing about the Brewers is that they're pissed. And what I mean by that is last year, they were in this exact same situation. They were in the wild card series hosting a best-of-3 series against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And they lost, and they came up very small in that 2-game sweep. So sometimes, the Brewers, who got their postseason experience last year, a little bit of it, sometimes that can be a good thing for them. So it's not that the Brewers are easy. They're not. The Mets will be underdogs against whomever they were facing. But I think I started leaning towards Milwaukee because A, their lineup doesn't scare me nearly as much as San Diego's. B, the travel. And then C, and I should not be thinking this, but I'm going to be honest with you. I want the Phillies in the divisional series. And I know I'll regret ever saying that because the Mets will lose 2 straight to Milwaukee and we'll never even get there. But I did start thinking about all of those factors, and it led me to preferring this side of the bracket. Now, the game is still going on. I'm still rooting for the Mets. Wasn't as laser focused on the game. They had a couple of scoring opportunities. Obviously, it was very weird because Chris Sale ended up getting scratched with a back issue. And I think we talked about this on the Rico the other day, that things were very suspicious with Chris Sale and the way the Braves were handling him. Well, the Braves are about to play a playoff game on Tuesday night. Is Chris Sale pitching? They're going to play a playoff game on Wednesday. Is Chris Sale pitching? So we'll see. And if he does pitch, is he compromised? Are we going to see the same Cy Young caliber Chris Sale in game 1 if he pitches game 1 against the San Diego Padres? So that was kind of a shock. They went with Grant Holmes, who had pitched the previous day. Lucchesi was on the mound. They rode Joey Lucchesi like no one's business. And they had a shot. It was 1-0 late until Huascar Brazoban gave up the 2-run hit. I think it was to Marcelo Zuna, and the Braves broke it open. But you could see the Mets were going through it. How much did they really want to be there? Were they really motivated to knock off Atlanta? Not really. They also were in that spot I described the other day where, because there's only 28-man rosters, there's only so many guys you can give an off day to. You can give it to Francisco Alvarez, easy. Here's another catcher. You could do it to Francisco Lindor. That's a priority. You could do it to Jose Iglesias, but outside of that, it was tough to give guys off days because you don't have enough guys to fill in. It's a 28-man roster. It's not a 40-man roster. So I watched the game a little bit while we were on the air. I listened to it on the car ride home, and I did feel very indifferent to the result. I had a slight preference to where they are now, which is the Milwaukee-Philadelphia side of the bracket. But ultimately, if they had won the game and gone to San Diego, it wasn't changing my life. I wasn't greatly passionate about one way or the other. I also think, and I've said this a lot in the past, I said this to Yankee fans a week ago, so I'll certainly say it to Met fans. We got to stop overreacting to season series. They don't mean anything. If you watch the Brewers over the weekend and said, boy, I haven't watched them all year. You watch them, you see the speed, you see the havoc they can wreak. It just reminded me that they're a good team. Okay, that's fine. I don't expect everybody to sit there watching the Milwaukee Brewers all the time. I get it. They won 90-plus games. You're not watching a lot of their games, and that's fine. But the Padres are good too. If we saw them, I know we saw them a little bit more recently. If you go back to August, you'd probably watch them and say, oh, yeah, they're pretty good too. But I think we get jaded by if we win or lose. The Mets did well against San Diego this year. They did. They had a great run against the Padres. They had great success against them at Citi Field. They went to California. They split the 4-game series. They should have won the 4-game series. So I think overall, there was a confidence against the Padres just based on the 7 games we played against them. And there's a lack of confidence against Milwaukee because of the 6 games we played against them. And Yankee fans feel that way about the Orioles. I've heard them talk about it. Well, let me remind you something, everybody. I give you good, I give you bad. In 1988, the New York Mets owned the LA Dodgers. What did it mean in the National League Championship Series? It meant nothing. In 2015, the New York Mets got destroyed by the Chicago Cubs. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Mets were 0-7 against the Chicago Cubs in the 2015 regular season. And then the NLCS comes around, and what happened? So I don't think the head-to-head, the 1-5, the Mets struggles in Milwaukee going back a couple of years, I just don't think it means anything. It doesn't mean they're going to beat the Brewers. I'm not saying they are. I have no idea what's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to be based on what we saw in the regular season. So I am not afraid of them. They should be favorites. They had a wonderful regular season. They have a very well-rested bullpen. The Mets are going into this season with a bullpen that's got major issues in terms of who's available, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But Milwaukee, San Diego, whatever. How'd you find yourself viewing that last game, Pete? Did you have a very strong rooting interest in where this team was going?
The one team I didn't want to play was the Brewers. So, yeah, I did. And also, I really wanted to knock out the Braves. Like I at the end of this whole thing, it was kind of weird to see both teams celebrating and like sharing in the celebration. I guess it's kind of cool, but on the other hand, now it's the freaking Braves. What are you doing? So I mean, yeah, I did kind of want to see the Mets come back, find a way to beat them, and break their hearts the way that they've done to us so many times.
Yeah, this win in game one and then subsequently the loss in game two does not settle or maybe even change necessarily our view of Atlanta. It was great to beat them. It was a wonderful victory. But I think that next year, or dare I say the NLCS, that'd be a fantasy. I think the next time we see Atlanta, our tortured history still exists. I don't necessarily think winning this game exercises those demons. Not that beating them in the second game would have done that also. But yeah, knocking them out would have been fun. It would have been fun, especially considering, the Braves are a dangerous team. The Braves could get to the postseason with that pitching and go on a crazy run where maybe we are watching them again. Though I think we'd all sign for that because it means we're going on a deep postseason run. We'll get to some of your emails. We got a lot of them. They're all positive this time in just a couple of minutes. But let me get to this series against Milwaukee and some early thoughts on it. So they haven't announced it yet, Pat Murphy, but Freddie Peralta is going to start game one. I'm going to assume Aaron Savali is going to start game two, just based on the last time he's pitched and how well he's pitched. And then game three, if it got to it, I guess the Brewers could go with Frankie Montas. They could also go with Tobias Myers, the kid that we saw on Friday, and he looked dominant. He's the one that came into the game. Was that Friday or Saturday, actually? Let me double check that. That was Saturday, my bad. So if he pitched Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, yeah, his day would be Thursday. And considering how well he pitched for the Brewers throughout the season, I think that's the answer. So I'd assume Frankie Montas is in the bullpen. So my assumption is Freddie Peralta, Aaron Savali, Tobias Myers would potentially be the three starters Milwaukee starts. I was looking at Freddie Peralta's career numbers against the Mets just to see if anything jump out at us in terms of lineup or in terms of one guy that maybe hits him better than others. And here's what I came up with. What I came up with was not really. The guy with the most at-bats against him is Harrison Bader. He's 4 for 18, 222 average with a home run. I wouldn't play Harrison Bader. I think Harrison had a great opportunity in game one of this doubleheader. They ended up pinch hitting for him late. I'd go reverse with Bader. He's coming in late for defense, but I just don't think he's hit enough to start. The other guy who has some at-bats against him is Jesse Winker. Jesse Winker is 6 for 18 with 2 home runs. I was thinking that Winker should have started game one of the doubleheader, that I may have leaned concerning what the Mets put out there. They didn't play Starling Marte, but they played Harrison Bader in center. When I saw that lineup, my initial thought was, why not play Taylor in center and Winker in right? We didn't see Jesse Winker in this game. Do we see him against Freddie Peralta? I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. I mean, those are decent numbers. 6 for 18 with 2 home runs. So who do you play? I would lean towards Brandon Nimmo in left, clearly. Tyrone Taylor in center, clearly. I mean, Tyrone Taylor has got to play. And then do you go Winker right, JD-DH, or do you go Marte right, Winker DH? I think I'm leaning towards Jesse Winker getting the start over even JD Martinez at DH. JD Martinez has 0 at-bats against Freddie Peralta. I thought that was sort of surprising. Brandon Nimmo's 0 for 8 with 3 strikeouts. Not going to sit him off of that. Starling Marte's 3 for 12 with a home run. And that's really it. Pete Alonso's 1 for 6. So there's not a lot against Freddie Peralta, but those are the numbers. I'm sort of intrigued by giving Winker another opportunity. I don't necessarily want to bury him on the bench despite his recent slump. JD Martinez has sort of shown a pulse. Sort of. I mean, said a little bit. He got out of the Ray Ordonez slump. He did have that going for him. So those are the numbers against Freddie Peralta. Aaron Savali, who I think is going to start game 2, it is so limited. Like, no one has experience against him. The guy with the most plate appearances against Savali is JD Martinez, who's 1 for 5. So there's nothing really there. But again, I assume he's going to start game 2. I think the only certainties I have right now in the outfield rotation, because the infield's set. Pete Alonso's at first, Iglesias at second, Lindor at short, Vientos at third. I think we all know that. So the only thing I feel good about in the outfield right now is Brandon Nimmo and Tyrone Taylor. That's it. Those are the only two guys. And I think right field and DH are the two things that are up for grabs. With JD, Starling Marte, Jesse Winker. I wouldn't even include Bader in this anymore. I wouldn't. I think Bader is a late inning defensive replacement. The other thought we have to have, the other conversation we have to have is Alvarez and Torrens. Francisco Alvarez is starting to hit. No question about it. And he delivered a huge, underratedly big hit in this game. He got the RBI double that made it 3-1 when the Mets were starting to wake up in the 8th inning. That was right after Spencer Schwellenbach gave up the leadoff double to Tyrone Taylor. And then they went to Joe Jimenez, and Alvarez jumped all over him. I think it was a first pitch double. I think I would start Torrens, though. I think I would. I think the Brewer running game is so good and such a threat against a Met team that in general doesn't hold runners on well. Severino does. So Sevy's got that going for him in game one. But I think I'd start Torrens under this thought process. The thought being, if I'm losing a game late, I'm going to use my bench. I'm going to use Alvarez, or maybe not Alvarez based on the matchup. Maybe it's a tough righty left in the game, and I'm going to a Jesse Winker, or I'm going to JD Martinez, or I'm going to whomever with Alvarez than coming in to catch. I think I'd rather go that way. I think I'd rather start these games, at least game one, under the attitude of I'm going to try to lock down this run game as best as I can. Torrens could do it considering the percentage he's thrown out this year compared to Alvarez. And Alvarez also continues to look very shaky behind the plate. Had another pass ball in game one. I'm not burying Alvarez because I fully expect that Alvarez plays. I wouldn't consider him for DH. For anyone who's thinking that, I wouldn't, because I think there's too much risk. If you're going to pinch hit for Torrens late in the game, Alvarez has to go catch, you lose the DH. So I don't consider that a viable option. But I do like the idea, at least in this series, at least in game one, to shut down and neutralize the Brewer run game between Severino, who's got a nice quick pickoff move, and Luis Torrens, who shuts down a run game. I think I'd go there. You like that, Pete, or would you stick with Alvarez?
I mean, here's my thing is I do think Alvarez is banged up right now, so I understand how you don't play him, but I don't think Torrens gives you anything at the plate these days either.
He doesn't.
So.
He doesn't give you anything at the plate. I'd bat him ninth, but if I'm going with my plus offense, and I am, that's why I don't consider Harrison Bader. Harrison Bader comes off the bench, adds defense late. I'm getting sticks out of everybody else. Everybody else in that lineup is an offensive player, and depending on the way the game goes, I pull the plug. Look, if it's the 4th inning and they're down 5-1 and Torrens is coming on with 2 on and 2 out, I'm not opposed to making that quick hook. So I think the way the game goes, you can make that change and go for offense. But I think the biggest threat that Milwaukee has, and we saw it in the head-to-head matchup, it's the one thing I would put some stock in. I don't put stock in the overall results, but yeah, the Brewers can run. And we know that that's a big issue, especially late in games with Edwin Diaz on the mound.
Alvarez, I mean, he is injured in so many different areas right now, if I'm correct. Like, yes. It's like his leg is hurt, his arm is hurt, I think his groin is hurt. Like, what is not hurt on this man right now?
Nah, he's banged up, man. He's banged up, and he just caught he caught the first game of the doubleheader. It's not even that, but sure, it's a good point. He is very banged up. I know Francisco Alvarez is going to want to play and try to play, and he will play. But I would go with Luis Torrens as the starting catcher, at least for game one. So I'm looking at yeah, go ahead.
It's one thing I don't think you'd mentioned. Maybe you did, and I totally missed it. Rewinding back to the game one. You know what? We because you talk about like running and stealing on base. Guess who had a freaking major inning for us on the mound? Adam Ottavino. I mean, hello.
Yes.
That was like waving a white flag right there for us.
And not only did Adam Ottavino have a great, important inning, it was a 1-2-3 inning against Albies, Ozuna, and Olsen. No, you're right. You go back to that game one, there's a lot of underrated moments when you think about Huáscar Brazoban comes in and gets a big out to try to keep it close. Adam Ottavino pitches a clean 7th inning. Absolutely. Yeah, no. Kudos to Otto, man. And then Otto came out and pitched the second game of the doubleheader. So they were using up that arm, man. Speaking of which, the Mets have to create a roster. Right? It's a 26-man roster instead of 28. You could start over. You can add whoever you want as long as they're on the 40-man roster. Very, very simple. So you need 13 pitchers and 13 position players, or, and I've seen teams do this in the wild card series, they actually go 12 pitchers and 14 position players. In fact, back in 2022, when the Mets were in the wild card series, they actually carried 3 catchers and went with 12 pitchers. The thought being it's only 3 games. You know, I've got my 3 starters, then I've got 9 relievers. The Mets, unfortunately, are not in that position. Because of the usage of guys on Monday, I believe they have to go with the max allowed 13 pitchers. They cannot do what a lot of other teams do, which is they go with the extra position player, with the thought being, like I said, it's only best of 3. I only need my 3 starters, and then if I only go to 12, I've got 9 arms that can come out of the bullpen. The Mets need all 13. Why, you ask? Let me count the reasons. Right now, here are the guys that are not available for game 1 of the wild card series. And I'll explain why if it's too confusing. David Peterson, who should be on this wild card roster, he will not start a game, but in a potential winner-take-all game 3, he would be on 3 days rest. So to me, David Peterson should absolutely be on the roster. He could even be available in game 2. I think that's on the table. That would be his throw day. So to me, David Peterson is on the roster, clearly not available for game 1. Jose Quintana, the guy who would be the game 3 starting pitcher on regular rest, if there is a game 3, he should be on the roster. He's not available in game number 1. Sean Manaea, the game 2 starting pitcher, not available. So I just gave you 3 guys who should be on the roster. I think we'd all agree on that. Not available for Monday. Tyler McGill's a tough one. Because Tyler McGill just pitched. So if you put him on the roster, is that worth it? He's not going to be available for 2 games. You'd really only have him available for a game 3. So let's take him off. Let's just say, you know what, Tyler McGill, sorry, bro. We appreciate the effort. Nothing personal. You will be on the postseason roster if we're fortunate enough to be in the divisional series. But for now, we got no use for you. Huascar Brazoban would not be available. He pitched in both games of the doubleheader. Adam Ottavino would not be available. He pitched in both games of the doubleheader. Edwin Diaz will in all likelihood not be available. He threw 1,000,000 pitches on Sunday. He threw 1,000,000 pitches on Monday. Could you use Edwin Diaz? I guess you could for a 3rd straight day. It's not even the 3 straight days. It's the sheer amount of pitches that he's thrown over the last 2. So I'm going to assume Edwin Diaz is not available. Phil Maton, who pitched in his 3rd straight game for the first time all season long, he is not available. So I have just listed to you 8 people of a potential 13 that are not available in game 1. So who is available in game 1 that are locks to be in the Met bullpen? Jose Budo, available. Ryan Stanek, available. Reed Garrett, available. Danny Young, available. I have counted 4 pitchers that are available for game 1 of the American League, Jesus Christ, the National League Wild Card Series. But that only adds up to 12 pitchers if we're taking Tyler McGill off of it. So who's the 13th pitcher? Well, let's go to the 40-man roster. Tyler Zuber is on the 40-man roster. Eric Orzi is on the 40-man roster. Grant Hartwig is on the 40-man roster. And Matt Gage, a left-hander, is on the 40-man roster. These are not great options. I mean, this is the problem. So based on that, you could say, Evan, if there's no options, why carry 13 pitchers? I mean, you're going to put Grant Hartwig on the roster? Here's the value in Grant Hartwig, or a guy of that nature, a Tyler Zuber, a guy that none of us trust. The value is eating up innings in game 1. Maybe the Mets are up 8-1. We could think about it positively. Maybe they're down 8-1 and you want to save arms. That's the only reason a guy like that would be on the roster. You're not putting him in a high leverage situation. You're not asking him to get big outs, in the 7th inning with a 1-run lead. But my count is that they will only have 4 available relievers for Tuesday's game.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Well, first of all, is Eddie Alvarez available in the bullpen?
You're funny. Eddie Alvarez is not eligible for the postseason. The Mets brought him in after September 1st, so
that
your bullpen joke doesn't even work.
I know. But realistically, you said Quintana is pitching game 3?
As of right now, when you look at the way things are lined up, Severino game 1, Minaya game 2, regular rest, and then it would be Jose Quintana's day for game 3. David Peterson could pitch in game 3. He would be doing it on 3 days rest, which I think certainly makes him available in the bullpen. I could even argue he'd be available out of the bullpen in game 2 on 2 days rest.
Well, here's my question to you. You're telling me when is Quintana's throwing day? Can they make that him available for game 1?
Yeah,
for an inning?
I guess they could, because it would be his throw day. I don't know if you necessarily want to do that. I don't know if you want to mess with that, because he is the guy that would be pitching a winner-take-all game 3. But, you may not need 5, 6, 7 innings out of Quintana if David Peterson is available, which he will be, because it'll be 3 days rest. So you could look at that game as more of a tag team effort, if you will. I know they're both left-handers, so it doesn't necessarily fit very well. The other guy who I have not mentioned, only because I don't know how to mention him, I haven't heard an update on him, is Paul Blackburn. Paul Blackburn would be a tremendous bullpen addition right now. And I know Paul Blackburn even said about a week ago when there was an update on him, he hopes to contribute out of the bullpen, but we haven't heard anything. So that could be a surprise roster addition that we're not thinking of. They have a lot of guys on the injured list that, we just haven't talked about. Now, most of them are out for the year. Dednell Nunez, I think they already announced, is out for the year. Sean Reed-Foley is out for the year. Kodai Singh is not out for the year, but what's his deal? None of us know. I doubt he would be a surprise addition just because we haven't heard anything. But that's the trickiness of this roster. If they go and say, look, we're not putting Grant Hartwig on this roster, it's just not worth it, then you could go extra position player. In that case, though, you got to ask yourself, what position player are you putting on the roster? Eddie Alvarez is not eligible. He's not going to be on the roster. So do you go with, I got to look at the 40-man and even see who's available. Is Reyes still on the roster? I guess they could go to him if they want another speedster coming off of the bench. I'm looking to see if he's even there. I can't even remember. Yeah, he's gone. They've got Jose Azocar. He's the guy who could be a speedster coming off the bench. They've got DJ Stewart, not to make you sick, but they do have DJ Stewart. And they got Brett Beatty, who I know was mentioned briefly as a possibility. Brett Beatty's interesting. Maybe you do add a Brett Beatty. Only for this reason. Hear me out. It's another left-handed bat. We already talked about the idea of if you start Luis Torrens because of the defense, you can pinch hit for him if necessarily early on in the game. And right now, the Mets don't have a left-handed bat off the bench other than Jesse Winker. If Jesse Winker starts, there is no lefty on the bench. So you could go extra position player instead of going to the 13 pitchers, just because you don't really have a lot of great options.
So all right. So here's the reason why I wouldn't do Brett Beatty. The reason is because I just don't think he has solidified himself in the majors. It's almost like putting Francisco Alvarez up in game 160 or 158 or 9 against the Atlanta Braves a couple of years ago. It's like, we're bringing him up here in this spot. It's been too long for Brett Beatty, so that's why I say no to it. On the other hand, sometimes the playoffs, you turn into a different beast mode. Like, we've seen so many random people. Scott Eckstein is one of the significant players in World Series history. Craig Counsell, another guy too. Like, these guys, some people just step up in big moments. Maybe this is the spotlight for Brett Beatty.
Yeah, I think if you're adding another position player because of what we talked about with the pitching, that it just doesn't pay to add anyone else and you want to go with the 5 guys on the bench, I think he would be the guy, for the reasons that you gave. And also just there's a little bit of a threat to him late in the game if you need a bat. Let's get to some of your emails. We've got a lot of them. I'll try to get to. How long have we been doing this? We've been 55 minutes. All right, we'll do a few minutes of this.
Ignore the time. I do have some voicemails I'd like to go to too. So how about you do an email? I'll do a voicemail.
All right, let's start off with the National League wildcard roster. Zalman writes, what an amazing day, but it's on to the business of the wild card series. I've thought about the X factors in this series, and one of them is clearly the Brewers' running game. What do you think about the idea of starting Terrence behind the plate, now Alvarez at DH, Marte in right, Taylor in center, Bader late for D to help slow the Brewers' running game down? I'm with you on Terrence. I'm not with you on Alvarez. Alvarez has to come off the bench. He cannot DH unless – you ready for an unless? Unless that fifth spot off the bench isn't Brett Beatty, but it's a catcher. Actually, I don't think you can, because you need to be on the 40-man roster, and they do not have a catcher on the 40-man roster. I think they'd have to pull up a Hayden Singer from the minor leagues. I got to go read the roster rule book just to confirm if that's allowed or not. But carrying a third catcher may not be the worst thing in the world, because it would allow you to do something like that. But honestly, I wouldn't. I would start Luis Torrens, but I'd have Francisco Alvarez coming off the bench. All right, Pete, play a voicemail.
I do have. So we have 4. I just want to let you know. I'm going to go in like progression of the bad parts, some interesting parts, and then the end. So this
all
one
right.
is,
It's like being a Met fan. It's like our entire season. Go ahead.
all right, here's the first one.
Hey, this is Joe from Vegas. I'm watching this pitiful performance by a Mets team that is definitely outclassed by the Atlanta Braves. It's so obvious that regardless of what player puts on that Brave uniform, they have so much confidence that they know they're going to beat the Mets that it just doesn't matter. And Mendoza, I don't know where this guy's head is, but it's definitely not with trying to win this game. So the Mets have second and third, 2 outs. This is the only chance the Mets are going to have to score a run. And they leave it up to Harrison Bader? Are you kidding me? You have Marte, who probably would have struck out anyway, or Winker, who probably would have struck out anyway, but at least give your team a chance to drive in those 2 runs. You let Harrison Bader swing. The kid is in there for defense.
Wow. I remember all those emotions. It was just so early in the day when things were very bad. That's for sure.
He did go on to say other things very mean about Bader and the Mets, and how they're never going to get another chance. And I can't believe this, blah, 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 blah. So I did want to shorten it up a little bit, but I think we were all feeling that way.
He definitely hit the emotions that we all had. I mean, they looked lifeless. They were getting shut out by Spencer Schwellenbach. And every time Tiki or somebody would tell me, well, Spencer Schwellenbach is good, give him credit, I'm thinking to myself, he's fine. He shouldn't be this good. He shouldn't be Christy Mathewson on steroids. And Harrison Bader's at-bat in the third inning felt like one of those at-bats that was going to come back and kill him. You had a runner on second with nobody out. You had a runner on third and 1 out after Alvarez grounded out, but he was able to go to third. And Harrison Bader swung at the first pitch and hit the easiest chopper to third base. Harrison Bader had a very clutch year for this team. A lot of big hits. He was obviously very clutch for the Yankees back in 2022. He has not hit for a while. And I think what Harrison Bader has secured is what I always thought he was, and that is a 4th outfielder. And that's a guy off the bench who could supply some good defense. There is a value to him. I'm not suggesting he be kept off the roster for the wild card series, but he's not hitting, and I would not be playing him. All right, let's listen to another voicemail. You got me all fired up now. Give me the it starts off really bad, and now it's going to get a little bit better. Go ahead.
I had to go away from the game for a bit. Some of us work for a living. Oh my God, this is going There's that Harry Bader leaving on a half a country on the base pass. Oh, baby. I love him. Oh my God, my man Nimmo. Sorry I ever doubted you. When I emailed you at the end of 6 down 3-0, I'm like, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. But whoa.
Wow. some freaking reaction.
I'm pretty sure that was after the Nimmo home run.
Yeah, I think we all had that feeling, especially when Brandon pimped it. He drives it to right field and he just kind of stands there for a second. Yeah, that eighth inning was so incredible. And not that it gets forgotten about, but it kind of does because they blew the lead. And then now we all remember the Lindor home run. But you had Iglesias coming through with the game-tying hit behind in the count against the other Iglesias, which was impressive. You had the Vientos sac fly. You had the Nimmo home run. It really was an incredible inning that all got started because of Tyrone Taylor, who has secured himself an everyday role as of right now. Tyrone Taylor is one of those guys in the outfield where he plays, period. He's got to play. And he's the one that got the inning completely started. Let's hear another voicemail.
Man, what a game, I tell you. I take back most of what I said the other night. The biggest difference from this team from 2022 to 2024 is simply one person. That's Francisco Lindor. Lindor's taken hold. He's the leader of this team now. There's no question about it. We've had debate of who is the leader. It is Francisco Lindor. And let me tell you, that is the biggest home run in franchise history. There's no question about it. I can't even think of one that would even come close to that. Maybe when Lenny Dykstra hit the Game 3 home run in '86 in the World Series to ignite the Mets. I don't know. I can't even think of one that's big. But I'll tell you, or Murphy's home runs, one of Murphy's home runs. But anyway, Lindor, what a shot that was. And they can say whatever they want about Shohei Ohtani. Okay, Shohei Ohtani has never hit a home run as big as Lindor just did there. Never. Not this year, at least. That's for sure. And so the MVP award, what did Rob Manfred call the World Series trophy a few years ago? A piece of metal. The MVP award to me is a piece of metal because Shohei Ohtani's going to win it. But that doesn't mean he's the most valuable player in the league. The most valuable player in the league is Francisco Lindor. And he proved that here on Monday. What a shot. What a year.
He is our MVP. Whether he wins the award or not, and he's not, so let's not lose sleep over it. He has been our MVP, and I think that's what really matters. And that'll be it. Shohei Ohtani is not only going to win the MVP this year, he's going to win about 9 more, because as soon as he goes back to pitching, all he's got to do is fart a couple of times, and he's going to win the MVP. It'll be a lock. Matthew Hamlin was at the game. Evan and Pete, I was at the first game, and it was the greatest game I've ever been to in person. Living in Atlanta, I've seen many memorable disasters in that house of horrors. Happy to get out of this one alive. I was never confident and was not surprised Diaz blew it, since that always happens here. This felt like the World Series since we never beat them. Now time to go on a run and beat the Brewers. Yeah, man, I can only imagine what it felt like being in that stadium, probably trying to hide when Ozzie Albies hit the bases clearing double off of Edwin Diaz, but then the ultimate joy of getting to see the Mets win that game. What I am curious about, Matt, and you could write us back at thericob@gmail.com, did you stay for game 2? There was no reason to stay, but did you stay for game 2? Drew in Asbury Park writes, this game was an absolute classic and one that the Mets usually lose, but not anymore. The 2024 Mets have bounced back every single time they were knocked down on their backs this year, and this game was a microcosm of the entire season. What a moment, what a game, what a season, and it's not over yet. How about this? The producer of the radio program I host on Evan and Tiki, Tommy Lugauer, also known as Positive Tommy, has dropped an email to thericob@gmail.com. He has never done that before. He usually just tweets the same things over and over again.
Let me guess. Did he email the same thing over and over again?
I'm going to read it for you. It's very quick and pithy. A message from Positive Tommy. I hope everyone listened to me and didn't make vacation plans in October. The Mets are playing baseball. Today was a great day, but the work is not done. I believe in the power of positivity. I believe in Positive Tommy. I will lead us. So that's from Positive Tommy.
Can I just be, for the record, you go back to any podcast at any point in time, there was a positive Pete before there was a positive Tom.
There was. No, I agree with you. I think the mistake you made is that you didn't tweet the same things over and over again.
Yeah, because it's just stupid to you guys hear, you guys know what I'm saying. And listen, I don't need to say it every day for it to sink in. Everyone knows where I stand. I am a true believer and always was this team. And again, I will tell you this much. If you look at the Yankees, they're the best team in baseball. How many wins they have this season? They didn't hit 100. It's baseball is mediocre, and this team was a good mediocre team. And now they're on that run. They could beat anybody. So I always believe them.
Yep.
Screw you, Tommy.
Positive Pete was here before Positive Tommy.
Damn right.
Kendrick writes, OMG moments continue. Today, Francisco Lindor etched his name into Mets history for all the right reasons. Literally breaking his back, carrying us all season. And coming into this year, and even during the season, people always seem to treat him like they did Carlos Beltran. But oh my, how one at-bat can change it all. I'm so happy for him and the entire organization. This season has truly been an OMG moment after another. And speaking of OMG, can we please give props to Jose Iglesias? A Rico for the postseason, but off the top of your head, outside of Yoenis Cespedes, is this the best in-season acquisition for the Mets for anyone under 40? Sleep easy, no nightlight tonight. Thank you, Kendrick. Jose Iglesias was not an in-season acquisition. How about that? And I don't blame Kendrick for saying that because he was called up in the middle of the year, right? So we think of him being called up. Remember back when they were carrying Beatty and Vientos and they didn't have a backup shortstop? And we would sit here on the Rico saying, oh my God, they need a backup shortstop. How long can this go? This was after they DFA'd Joey Wendell. And so they finally called up Jose Iglesias. Jose Iglesias was in spring training with this team. I remember, I don't know if anyone wants to go to the archives of spring training Ricos, but I remember talking about him with you and how, yeah, we always liked him as a shortstop back in the day with Boston or Detroit. And he's a Gold Glove caliber player. Certainly never thought he would have this kind of impact, but he was kind of on the edge of roster talk, and he never made it. I don't think any of us were beating the drum for him to make it, but Iglesias was brought in a minor league deal during the offseason. So I appreciate it, Kendrick, but it wasn't even an in-season acquisition. I think the Rico around Iglesias is the obscure signing that has a major impact. Like one that jumps out at me is R.A. Dickey, right? R.A. Dickey was signed during the offseason. Nobody gave a crap. Nobody thought about it. And then he bursts onto the scene and becomes a big part of the Met rotation for a few years, capped off by him winning the National League Cy Young. So Iglesias was here for a while. It just wasn't thought about. But yes, he does deserve flowers. Lindor is the MVP. Iglesias, though, you could argue is a close second.
Well, the other thing about Iglesias that you didn't mention was, again, yeah, he barely made the team, but he wasn't even thinking about playing baseball. Like since he wasn't on the 40-man roster, originally got that minor league deal, he was like, you know what, I might be out of baseball. I might take that road, screw it. And he thought about it, and he decided to take that minor league deal. So we got lucky that he even decided to stick around that much longer.
No, absolutely. I mean, it could have been a guy. If he's not here, I don't know what this looks like. You know what I mean? Like, well, what does this season look like if Jose Iglesias doesn't come up with the song? And then, oh, by the way, the 340. Let's not forget that the guy somehow put together a 340 batting average this season and got every big hit.
We would have been screaming, oh my God, over Joey Wendell making errors every day.
Yes, pretty much. I think that's what we would be doing. You're right. Let me get to a couple of more. I know we've been going a while, but hey, how often do the Mets, make the postseason? Doesn't happen that often, especially off a win like that. Samuel Lowenthal writes, Evan, you nailed it. Oh, I nailed something. Wow. There is much to say about today's game. I could write you a book on it. I'll let the others speak to that. The one thing that I will call out, and all the loyal Rico listeners know this, is props to you, Evan, as you very early on harped on the importance of tiebreakers. I remember you speaking to the importance of the Cardinal and Cub games in the early summer for that reason. Now those teams certainly fell back, but you nailed the concept and put it in the front of our minds. How big is it now? We are in, and Arizona goes home because of the tiebreaker. That clutch 3-2 win on a Thursday afternoon in late August. Not just was it important to bounce back from the previous night's horrible loss, but it was critical as it was, and it helped them win the season series. It's why we made it today. Evan, you're a man of detail. Thank you, Sam. I think that it was just that if it's going to be a close race in this new world of baseball where there are no one-game playoffs, tiebreakers are always going to matter. They're always going to matter. I mentioned it a lot with the Yankees. It turned out not to matter with them, But in terms of winning the AL East, I thought, hey, the season series against the Orioles will matter. Didn't matter in that case. Yankees won the division. They didn't win the season series against the Orioles. So I think this is just the new world we're living in baseball, where you should always think about tiebreakers because, look, the Mets lost the division 2 years ago. No one remembers this. We had the same record as the Braves. They won the tiebreaker. We think of the 3-game sweep, but that won them the tiebreaker. The Mets today made the playoffs because of a tiebreaker. It changed everything about the way this day would have gone. So tiebreakers matter, and you are right. And I know we'll be doing a lot of this during the offseason, though. Best wins of the year, worst losses of the year, all that kind of crap. That game in Arizona, the day after the Corbin Carroll Grand Slam, was monstrous. Words can't describe how important that game was. And I would say pound for pound, after this one, because obviously game 161 will live in history, I think that game in Arizona, the bounce back game, most important game of the year.
All correct. I think another thing, and I know that I said the other day on a drunk Rico, when I was drunk Rico, but salvaging those series early on, I know it didn't at the end of the season. It was like we were 13-14 on the season on the Sunday games after we lost 2 in a row. But the point is they could have just bent over and took it and said, let's get out of here with the loss. But they went out and won games at times where they had to. And that just goes back to the resiliency of this team.
No doubt. Dallas is just pissed at Hoffman. He says he loves the pod, but believes they're being uploaded late recently, so he wants you to get on that. So that's from Dallas.
I have to apologize. That is true. I mean, I've legitimately fallen asleep as I've been trying to press the button because of how exhausted I am. But it's because I love what I do, and I do a lot, and I apologize. So this one will be up there right after.
I think that there's a lot of ways you can consume the Rico Brogna now. Obviously, download the podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We also now broadcast everything live on YouTube, so you can see the podcast instantly, if you can, or after the fact, if you want. So there's a lot of different ways you can consume the Rico Brogna, but we appreciate it. A lot of people want to know what Negative Dan had to say. Negative Dan has become a legendary figure here on the Rico. And Negative Dan sent me 2 emails. The first one was very quick. It was written at 4:21 p.m. He wrote, "The most incredible win I've ever seen. No other words necessary." And it's going to piss Pete off what he's about to say. "Congrats to Positive Tommy, the real winner in all of this." Dan waited 2.5 hours and then put together an entire email. So it was just an initial, I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. Here's what he wrote. "My brain still can't comprehend what happened. The game was throwing every ghost at us it possibly could. Whether it was Jared Kelenic rising from the dead to pinch hit against Edwin Diaz and almost burying his Met career after he doesn't cover first and then blows the game, or Travis d'Arnaud being the tying run with a guy on second. Actually, the tying run was on second. And every single one of us was picture him lining a base hit in the center field and ripping our hearts out again. Somehow they survived all of it. I can't remember the last time I was this shocked and speechless after a game. And I really don't know what to say right now besides they proved all of my shit talking wrong. At the time, I called it the most incredible win I've ever seen, given every circumstance around it, and I still can't come up with anything better. I'm in the not born for 86 category. Yeah, I think that's important for all of us to realize. There's a lot of us who just don't remember 86. It's not ignoring it; it's that we didn't experience it. So clearly, Dan is in that category. My initial reaction is to say, if they're gone in 48 hours, then it was all for nothing. But a win that good can't be for nothing, even with a quick exit. Even if it's not this year, it would be criminal if we look back at this game and it wasn't a springboard for us heading into the future. And I have complete faith in Stern Doza to make sure that's the case. How about that? That's a little positivity from Dan, basically saying, look, that win was so incredible. Even if we lost to Milwaukee, the hope is this is a kind of win that springboards us into the future in this new era of Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns. Like, it's tough to be negative. I think what I would say, because I've certainly been negative the last couple of days. I don't think I've been negative all year. We certainly came into this season, Pete and I, with some optimism. I thought they would win 86 games and be the third wild card. Well, guess what? They won 89 games and were the third wild card. So from that standpoint, I wasn't very far off. But I was negative over the last week, and that negativity came from the ghosts, like Dan pointed out. It came from the way they lost game one in Atlanta. It came from the way they lost Friday in Milwaukee, the way they were lifeless on Saturday in Milwaukee. I think all of that, and then you combine it with the way this game started, game one of the doubleheader, being shut out by Spencer Schwellenbach for 7 innings, it was very difficult to not have those old emotions come up. So I apologize, but you have to understand why guys like myself and others had that kind of negativity. I think it was brought out of us by the way the team played, but this was a truly incredible win. It's a win we'll never forget. And now we hope that this leads to something. And we have no time to really think more than the playoffs are about to start. Less than 24 hours later, the Mets are going to Milwaukee to play the Brewers. And hopefully the script now leads to something amazing, right?
You get the last words, but I'm going to say what I said yesterday when you asked about how I felt about this game and what's my message. Hold on to your butts. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, the Mets begin a best of 3 against the Milwaukee Brewers. There have been 8 wild card series in Major League Baseball. I'm not including 2020. I'm talking about this era that began in 2022. And listen to this, Pete, because I think this is kind of fascinating. It doesn't mean anything for this series. It's just more the background on this run that we've had of wild card series. There have been 8 wild card series. Of those 8, 5 times the road team won the series. So the road team has a little bit of an advantage, as much as, oh my God, you got to go to one city and play all 3 games. So far, it has not bared out as a huge advantage. 5 of the 8 road teams have advanced. And how about this factoid? There have been 8 wild card series. 7 of 8 have been sweeps. The only wild card series that was not a sweep was ours. The series against San Diego 2 years ago, where we lost game 1, won game 2, and then ultimately lost the winner-take-all game 3. Will that trend continue? We're going to find out. Now, we'll be doing Ricos after every playoff game, but I'm going to warn you. I'm going to warn Pete too. Game 1 against Milwaukee starts at 5:30. You can imagine what that does to me. I'm on the air until 6:30. So I haven't figured out what I'm going to do. Obviously, I'm going to be on the air for the first hour of the postseason game. Not the end of the world, because then the show is over and I could watch the rest of it. But I may, because I've decided, what am I going to do? Like, after the show, do I just stick around and watch the game? Or do I immediately go home and DVR the game the way I've been doing it all year? I am probably leaning towards DVRing it so I can get home and be with my family. And then I start the game from wherever I left off. So that just means that our Ricos, or the Rico after game 1, will be delayed. You're not going to get that Rico 5 minutes after the game ends, because I am certainly not going to catch up. So I would project to you, for anyone who's like, hey, I want to watch or listen to the post-game Rico live. I don't want to wait till it's uploaded. I don't want to wait till it's downloaded. I'm just warning you, we're probably looking at more like a 9:30, 10 o'clock first pitch, just because of the start time, which is 5:30. Luckily, that is the only game in this series that has that kind of odd start time. Game 2 of the series on Wednesday night is scheduled to start at 7:38. That's a game that I'm pretty sure I'll be able to catch up on, and we'll probably just do a podcast when that game is over. And as of right now, this is card subject to change as well, but the Thursday game, if it got to a game 3, is not scheduled to start till 8:38. So that's a much later start. Won't have an issue. So for anyone who wants it live, I'm just going to warn you, we're probably going to be on a little bit of a delay after game 1 just because of the start time.
Is it possible? And I know this is just out. This, you and your phone, and you're very good at avoiding any type of spoiler. Maybe have your wife tweet out for you, Evan starting the Rico right now. Evan not starting the Rico, but starting the you're watching the game right now at that point in time, so we can all follow with you and go through your emotions. Is that possible?
I could do that without my wife doing it, because the beautiful thing about social media is I can tweet without knowing what's going on. I don't have to look at what people are tweeting. So, yes, I will tweet when I'm restarting the game, and I'll say 5th inning, game may be over for you guys. 5th inning, I can't believe Severino's pitched perfectly so far, whatever it is. Yeah, I'll give you live tweets, but we will have a Rico. I can promise you that. It's just going to be a little bit later, and we'll have Ricos after every postseason game. Hopefully that extends for a while. Hopefully we're not going into off-season Ricos too quickly, but we appreciate it. Appreciate the support. Appreciate you listening. You could check out on YouTube our entire Evan and Tiki show, which was basically a live watch party, and you can watch my mental breakdowns and the experience of that game occurring while doing a radio show. It was quite an experience. That's also on the WFAN YouTube page. But we appreciate you downloading, listening, and subscribing to another edition, a happy edition, a playoff edition of Rico Brogna. Good night.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.